Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. A very special welcome back to everybody for everyone that's joining us virtually. Two people I'd like to introduce before we start the meeting are new sitting around our virtual table. Sarah Urquia, and she's one of our new student trustees, and she's going into grade 11 at Lester B. She took co-op this summer and for specialist high school major program. Welcome. And Ben Donji, he's going into grade 12. He's at St. Pete's. He worked this summer to save money for university where he'd like to study health sciences. Welcome, Ben. The other two people I'd like to welcome is newly appointed Superintendent Nicola Benton. Welcome, Nicola. And there she is. And Superintendent Sean Kelly. Now, Sean is dealing with death in his family. He's attending his grandmother's funeral. But we'll welcome him on the next meeting. So last June, our Board of Trustees approved adding this board meeting in August as a means of receiving an update on the return to school plans. I'd like to point out that the normal school startup board meeting topics will be addressed during the first board meeting of September, after the school year has begun. At the meeting, we'll have our traditional summer updates and we'll formally commission our two new student trustees, Ben and Sarah. Today's meeting will focus mainly on our return to school plans and the health and safety measures that we've been put in place to start this 2021-2022 school year. I'd like to now call upon Sarah to begin our meeting with the Land Acknowledgement. Sarah?
Thank you. As we gather virtually today from all across the Ottawa region, we acknowledge that we and the Ottawa Catholic School Board are located on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Algonquin people. We recognize their long-standing relationship with this land, which remains unceded. We pay respect to all Indigenous people in this region from all nations across Canada who call Ottawa home.
Thank you. Father Saunders, can I call you on for opening prayer, please?
Second. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Faithful God, your love for us surpasses all our hopes and desires. We thank you for your constant presence and goodness in our lives. And we are grateful for our time together today. We beg you to bless the work of our hands in the service of your children through the ministry of Catholic education. May we be wise stewards of the gift of Catholic education entrusted to us in this province. May all our efforts be guided by you, bring glory to your name, and find their completion in you. And we ask you this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
And we pray for our staff and students' extended family members, especially those who have lost their lives due to COVID-19. Please remember in your prayers the following who have passed away: Liam Doody, husband of Karen Wheeler, executive assistant in the Leading and Learning Department; Ease Princeville Nibuchi Ehoro, father of Dr. Prince Ehoro, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisor in the Leading and Learning Department; John Borelli, fiancé of Jenny Perla Leon, Manager of International Recruitment and Development, Continuing and Community Education; Quinn Kamar, a young student in the Toronto Catholic District School Board who passed away due to a boating accident; Hugh Check Jack Wee, father of Martin Wee, teacher at Our Lady of Peace School; Joan Longpre, mother-in-law of Elizabeth Longpre, teacher at Our Lady of Peace School, and grandmother of Jessica O'Leary, educational assistant at Our Lady of Peace School. Aileen Nash, grandmother, and Larry Nash, father of David Nash, principal of St. Josephine Virtual High School. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. May they rest in peace. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father. Could you all stand, please, for O Canada?
Mr. Vice Chair, I think the chair has left the
I'm
meeting.
just
Reconnect.
seeing that, but I believe he's rejoining. There he is. Mark, are you able to hear us? Don't think he can. So in the interim, I will continue the meeting. Item C.
Can't wait to get back to the board table.
Oh, you're good, Mark? You can hear?
Yep.
Okay, great. We just finished O Canada.
Yeah, no, I was sitting down and pressed unmute and hung up.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Can't wait to get back to the board office. Delegations? None. Ms. Close?
None.
I'll take that as a
Thank
no.
you, Chair.
In public session, can I have a mover for the approval of the agenda, please? Trustee Simpson and Trustee Whitted. That the agenda for the regular board meeting of August 31st, 2021 be approved as presented. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. No school department profile, no declarations of conflict of interest. See none. Confirmations of minutes of the regular board meeting of June 22nd, 2021. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee McEwen and Trustee Moore. That the minutes for the regular board meeting of June 22nd, 2021 be adopted as presented. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There's no unfinished business from previous meetings. There's no trustee motions. Presentation and consideration of committee reports. Committee of the whole board, August 31st, 2021. Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes, one item to report out, Mr. Chair, moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by Trustee Moore, that the memorandum from Superintendent of Finance and Administration dated August 25th, 2021, entitled Audit Committee Recommendation be received, and that the 2021 Audit Service Plan from Deloitte LLP for the year ending August 31st, 2021 be approved. And Mr. Chair, that was carried.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item L, presentation and consideration of staff or trustee reports. The reason we're here this evening, a memo from the Director of Education, update on return to school for September 2021. Mr. D'Amico, please.
Point of order, Chair, if I could, I do believe that we have skipped over trustee motions, and there were 2 trustee motions.
I thought they were going to be arising from the presentation.
We can do it that way. That's fine, if that's the preference. I'm fine with that. That's fine. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted at the beginning of this meeting, this is the only presentation this evening, so it will be longer than our traditional 10-minute staff presentation. At the end, I'll do my best to answer any of your questions, and if needed, our superintendents are available to add more details or to respond to your questions related to our return to school plans. I'd like to begin by thanking the superintendents and their staff for the work that's gone into preparing for another start of the school year, once again educating during a pandemic. In addition, there's been a great deal of work by central staff, and our school-based staff continue to work hard to welcome back students to in-person learning. Last year, in late August, we had to keep changing the start dates. We were staggering entry by grade. We had no transportation at all for any elementary students during the first week of school last year. And we were still working late August on how to offer virtual education at the same time as in-person learning. This year, there are still some unknowns and some changing protocols, but overall, we have a much more stable-based system than last year. It is a later start this year as we return to a traditional school year beginning on the first day after Labor Day. All of our students will be in person or virtual. They will all begin on Tuesday, September 7th. The only staggered entry we are planning is the traditional 2 days for those in our 2-year kindergarten program. There are 7 PD days allowed during a school year. Last year, 3 of these PD days were placed at the beginning of the year for staff to prepare health and safety measures to address virtual options. While this was helpful, it meant that we only had 4 remaining professional learning days spread out across the rest of the year. This year, we have 1 PD day taking place on September 2nd with a key focus on health and safety. It should be noted that many of our staff have been taking part in summer professional learning, especially with our August Summer Institutes. Having just the 1 PD day to start the year means we will be able to spread out the remaining 6 across the school year. Last year, we started the year with about 27% of all of our students in virtual. We had 12,000 students enrolled in 2 virtual programs last year. This year, heading into the week before the start of school, we are anticipating about 5% of all students being in virtual and 95% returning to in-person learning. We're pleased that the trustees supported the budget last June to allow us to offer this option as permanent school for the year for students in elementary attending Blessed Carlo Virtual School and in secondary at St. Josephine Virtual School. The virtual schools are not fully funded by the Ministry of Education like our other schools. So you have prioritized making this work operational for our students and our staff. Thanks to the leadership of the virtual admin teams, especially Superintendent Velati and Shelley Montgomery, Superintendent Montgomery, we're in great shape to start the year. Both of these schools will be supported by Trustee Simpson this year. This summer, our communications team focused largely on supporting students going into kindergarten. Since the new students could not visit their schools last year, we prepared 3D tours of a typical kindergarten class in their schools to help with their transition. We will be flexible this year for our kindergarten students so that if a parent is only comfortable with part-time attendance during the pandemic, such as mornings only or afternoons only or every other day, or even just 1 day a week to start, we will work together to make this work for our families. We also recently informed our parents that based on the latest information from Ottawa Public Health, we would be enhancing our masking requirements from grades 1 to 12 to change to kindergarten to grade 12. This decision is consistent with the 2 Ottawa French boards that began school today, and many other Catholic school boards across the province, including several that had successful K-12 masks mandated last year. To date, Ottawa Public Health has not mandated any particular actions for our board. However, they have given their recommendations on how we can strengthen our plans with enhanced safety measures, and they will continue to support each board with our selected implementation plans, providing us with advice and guidance based on the most recent COVID-19 conditions in Ottawa. In terms of the kindergarten masks, the correspondence with Ottawa Public Health was that considering the challenge of a more transmissible Delta variant and younger children not eligible for vaccination, also knowing the experience of kinder-age children to wear masks, their view was that kinder-age children should wear masks in school to reduce the risk of transmission. We know that not everyone will agree with masks for kindergarten students. We know whether it's our operational decisions around masks, field trips, sports, or cohorts, there will be different opinions across our city. It's important for everyone to recognize that we're a board filled with compassionate and caring individuals, and our kindergarten educators will work with those that need help learning this practice. They'll support them and teach them along the way. It will be a flexible approach to start the year, but our goal will be for all students to wear a mask indoors, unless there are medical reasons or other valid reasons why a student is not able to wear a mask. We also have a small number of students with special education needs that were exempt from wearing a mask last year, and this will continue with our students in kindergarten and across all grades this current school year. We received close to $500,000 in COVID funding this summer to assist students with special needs transition into schools this fall and to provide them with support over the summer. Many of these programs are still ongoing. Superintendent Benton will bring a summary report to a September board meeting with more details of each of the programs I've highlighted on this slide. Without going into detail of each program, I want to point out that there's a clear focus on social emotional learning, mental health and well-being that took place over the summer. Counseling continued over the summer. Staff completed additional psychoeducational assessments, focusing on students and children in our children's support schools. We'll bring a more detailed report on each of these programs in September. We're pleased to see that in Ottawa, those aged 12 and older, as of today, August 31st, 86% have had their first dose of vaccine, and 79% in Ottawa, 12 and older, have had both doses. We've yet to see a formal policy from our provincial ministry in terms of vaccines, but we have received guidance from the Ministry of Education that's indicated that by September 7th, we must collect an attestation from all staff indicating one of three things, and we have posted this information on our board website. Staff must indicate if they've received double vaccination, or if they're medically exempt from vaccination, or if they have selected not to get vaccinated for personal reasons. The ministry has indicated that those staff that are double vaccinated will require proof of that vaccination to be submitted at a board level. This is personal health information, and we can't share any individual information with staff or with parents, even though they would, I'm sure, love to know which staff are vaccinated and which are not. We will, however, take the aggregate total of all of those vaccinated in our board, and we will post that information on the board website by September 15th, and we will update it each month. Those staff that are medically exempt will be required to submit proof of that exemption, and they will undergo tests on a regular basis for COVID. We're waiting for that detailed information from the ministry as to how regular a regular basis refers to. And those staff that choose not to get vaccinated for personal reasons, the ministry has indicated that they will take an educational course on vaccines, and they will have to undergo regular tests throughout the school year. As mentioned, we're still waiting for the Ministry of Education's final logistic information on how this testing is to be used, how often unvaccinated staff must be tested. And while we know that parents would like us to disclose if their classroom educators are vaccinated, we're not able to do this for privacy reasons. but we will know whether or not they've been vaccinated, that we will know that they've been tested. And only those that are healthy to be in class or deemed by public health not to have COVID will be in our classrooms. You've heard over the summer months a lot about ventilation. You'll see on this slide that significant investments have gone into your schools to ensure that we meet or exceed the ASHRAE ventilation standards. On September 3rd, we will post on our board website school by school summary of the ventilation and the work that took place over the summer. You'll note that we have close or over now, over 1,000 HEPA units installed across our system, with a key focus for these portable units to be in the kindergarten classes. That was mainly because masks were not mandated by the province. We will keep these in those classrooms, given the challenge that some of these students will have to keep their masks on at all times. We've also placed them in areas such as special education classrooms and in our isolation rooms. We anticipate that the major ventilation projects will all be completed by the start of the school year. However, if there are any delays, we do have a contingency ready, and we have additional portable HEPA filters that will be placed in any classroom that is not yet connected to the mechanical ventilation systems. The unit ventilators mentioned for the portables will also bring air conditioning into these spaces. We do have some delays on the portables and unit ventilators due to hydro connections. These are being worked on. And for any of those projects that are delayed, that don't have, they may not have air conditioning to start the school year, but we will make sure that they have portable HEPA units if the unit ventilators are not in place for the first day of school. At the September board meeting, a more specific and detailed report focusing on ventilation will be provided by Superintendent Vala. In terms of transportation, last year you may recall that we started the year with a week delay before we could offer any yellow school bus transportation. We had canceled routes throughout the year due to driver shortages in this industry related to the pandemic. This year, we're in a much better position. We've confirmed routes with OSTA that are ready for next week that will address over 98% of all of our transportation needs. For the remaining 2%, OSTA is still working to find creative solutions, and some of the steps are listed in the link in your presentation. We also know that last year, many chose not to use transportation. They preferred to drive their children to school, and this information is not yet available until the first couple of weeks of school. And once OSTA has that information, they will look at combining some routes to free up drivers to address routes that are currently short drivers. Your trustee representations on the OSTA board include Trustee Simpson and Trustee McEwen, who is the chair of the committee. Superintendent Shimmons and myself are also part of the OSTA board of directors. So if there are any follow-up questions, you can certainly contact any of us and we'll share this information with OSTA. Mr. Chair, I could spend an hour on this next slide, but I won't. It covers the details of the operation guidance that the Ministry of Education released in early August. I have included a link to the 27-page document we received from the ministry. I'm going to highlight a few of the key areas for your information. Screening remains a key aspect of our mitigation efforts. The ministry announced today or yesterday 5 key symptoms that have proven to be possibly associated with COVID, and they will now be included in the screening. Those are fever and chills, cough, shortness of breath, losing taste or smell, nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea. Ottawa Public Health will be updating their screening tool, and the message remains, if you're sick, stay home. But we do know that they will no longer be required to be screened for COVID for things like a runny nose that we had to deal with last year. Masks, as noted, are mandatory for all grades, and we will provide masks to students that don't have them, forget them, or that become soiled while they're at school. We're expecting a shipment of another 76,000 masks for our students to arrive sometime this week, and we'll have those available during the year to support parents and students that don't have a mask of their own. All of our staff are provided with 2 medical grade disposable masks each day. Depending on their role, they may also receive additional PPE, such as a gown and gloves, and every employee has received face shields. Our staff continue to process the PPE so that we have what we need to keep our staff safe in our schools. Hand sanitizer or soap and water is located in every single classroom and across our school board at all the main entrances and exits. And as we did last year, we'll continue to allow students to fill up their personal hand sanitizers at school that they can use for home or in between classes. In terms of recess and breaks, based on the advice of Ottawa Public Health, we will continue to try to minimize the mixing of cohorts during recess. Recess is important to our students for their socialization and development. So we will monitor any outbreaks and follow our OPH guidance to increase or decrease restrictions when it comes to play in our schoolyards. For cleaning, our caretakers will continue to focus on touch point cleaning throughout the year, dealing with frequently touched areas such as hand railings and door handles. You'll see a bullet on that slide for mental health. This will be a key priority for all of our staff and students as they return next week. There will be a focus on the Professional Development Day this year, where we will share learning activities provided by School Mental Health Ontario. And this will be a focus during school startup to allow time for building relationships, for our students to share experiences, and to address some of the challenges that the pandemic has posed before we start to jump full speed into the curriculum. Lunch routines for our elementary students largely have not changed. They will continue as they did last year and previous to the pandemic. Our elementary students do eat lunch in their classrooms, and it's a best effort given the space needed to accommodate each of the students in the classroom. This has not changed from last year, and we had very few students contracting COVID. As you're aware, over 99% of our students and staff remain COVID-free throughout the year, thanks to our mitigation efforts. At high school, since we're returning to full-size classes next year, it will mean that we have twice the amount of students in the school each day compared to last year. There is a level of responsibility placed on our high school students to try and keep distance where possible, to keep their masks on except when eating, and to minimize the contact with their particular peer group. Our students in high school have always been able to choose to eat off property. That means a group of 4, whether they're sitting in our cafeteria or they're sitting outside or traveling to Subway or McDonald's for lunch, they need to try and keep themselves separated and protected, and we'll continue to educate them. That's an important role for our staff. Those safety measures will need to take place whether the students are under our direct observation or they're at home or going to a restaurant or a friend's house. Our actual schedules for academics for elementary students, it will be very similar to last year. We will continue to minimize cohort mixing. We do have specialty teachers, such as French teachers, that will rotate into the classrooms wherever possible. This worked very well last year, and we will continue with this model, with the exception that this year will also allow some small cohorts to mix while distancing, while wearing masks and paying attention to hygiene. An example might be students from different elementary classes that join together with a resource teacher to focus on a reading intervention program. At high school, we'll see the greatest change to the timetable. Although we still have lots of continuity with how we instructed students last year, we will see that instead of class splitting in half with one group learning at school one day and the other working independently at home and then switching, students this year in high school will go to school every single day with their full class. They will take one class in the morning, as they did last year. They will then have lunch, and then they'll take their afternoon class. Those 2 courses are part of the quadmester system. So the students will stay with those 2 courses for about 9 weeks, and then they will transition to their next 2 courses in the same format. We're hoping by the second half of the school year to return to a regular semester system with 4 courses per day, but that will depend on the spread of COVID in our community. For outbreak management, I've placed a link on the presentation slides with updated information regarding outbreak management. The key difference from last year is regarding those that have been vaccinated. If a student that is fully vaccinated comes in contact with someone that has COVID, they will still likely be deemed by Ottawa Public Health to be a close contact. The difference for that student or staff this year is if they remain asymptomatic, they do not have to isolate and they can continue to attend school. We anticipate less classes will need to be isolated as a result for grades 7 to 12. In elementary, where there is no vaccine yet, most likely the entire class will be deemed a close contact if a case of COVID comes into our school, and those students will need to self-isolate for 10 days and they will move to remote learning. We will follow the lead of Ottawa Public Health. So if I look at our health and safety enhancements and what's changed, the ministry indicated in August that the return to school plans might be supplemented by local public health guidance with stricter measures depending on local circumstances. In addition to the masks from K to 12 being mandated by our board, we will start the fall with only essential visitors in our schools. That could include a student teacher, a social worker, therapeutic supports, board consultants, learning partners, those helping with assistive devices. They will be in our schools this year. We will put a pause on field trips. Indoor assemblies will also be paused, and we will have minimal mixing of cohorts. We have also announced that for sports taking place indoor, masking will be required. There's a lot of information there and a lot of operations to take into account when educating during a pandemic. Due to the time, I'm leaving you just with this overview as opposed to every possible scenario that we have to deal with this year. But I would like to open it to questions. I'll stop sharing my screen, and either myself or our other superintendents will be happy to share with you the latest in terms of our plans getting ready for next year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Questions or comments? Trustee Whittock.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you to the Director. Director D'Amico, thank you for the presentation. Very detailed and obviously a fluid and evolving situation. So thanks to you and your staff for the work that you've put into this plan. Just a question on sports. You touched on the fact that masking will be mandatory for sports that are inside. Could you just sort of, because I'm getting a lot of questions from parents, can you walk us through, will all sports be permitted? Will only certain sports be permitted? Will there be restrictions on the number of individuals participating in sports, indoor versus outdoor? Walk us through a day in the life in sort of high school and elementary sports.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I want to start by saying that as a board, we view sports and all extracurricular activities as an important fabric of our schools. It's an important piece of mental health of our students. So whatever we can do to allow extracurricular and sporting activities this year, that's our plan, because we do feel it has a mental health component that is really important. Having said that, we want to work with Ottawa Public Health and their directions on how to keep students safe. So wherever possible, if there's an indoor sporting activity, we want students to wear masks. So if I use the example of a basketball game going on, whether it's interscholastic or it's intramural, we want to allow that basketball game to take place at our schools this year. We would much rather not have masks, because it would be a lot easier to play basketball without a mask, but we will be indicating to start the year, masks are required for any indoor sports. When you look at our outdoor sports, again, we're going to try and run a full complement of sports. Masks will be required where we can't guarantee that 2-meter distance between students. So we're going to have to learn this as we go through it as well, because it is a new experience, and we'll continue to work with public health. But our goal is to offer as many sports as possible, as many extracurricular activities. When they can't keep their 2-meter distance, then they will need to wear a mask. And whether that's a drama, or it's a math club, chess club, social justice group, or it's a sports team, that's what we're going to put in place to try and keep our students safe. Obviously, they'll need to have proper hygiene, hand hygiene when they're using equipment, and washing in between. That will be important. So I hope I've addressed the trustee's question, but on an individual basis, parents may choose not to have their child participate in sports because they're not comfortable with that level of risk. We're trying to balance the mental health needs of our students and the physical benefits of sport and physical activity with the risks of being in contact with other students.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. D'Amico, I have a question about outbreak management, especially more at the high school level. So if we've got some students that are at home because they're deemed high risk, and we've got some students in the classroom, how is education to continue? Because we're not using a hybrid method where the teacher is teaching to a computer as well as a class, are we?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'll start by addressing what the hybrid model is, so everyone's starting on the same basis. Some boards have opted to go with a hybrid teaching model, and a hybrid teaching model would mean while you're teaching the students in front of you in class, you're also responsible for those students that are at home. So it could be through a web camera, through Google Meet. In our current view is that the students in front of that educator are not getting the best of that educator, and the students at home are not getting the best of that educator. And your attention is divided in two different ways. As well, when you create a learning activity for online, there's pedagogical requirements that are very different than a learning activity in class. So those are the reasons to date we've not gone with that model. However, having said that, if someone has not selected the virtual program, which is all students virtual, and as the trustee has indicated, they're self-isolating because of COVID or exposure to COVID and everyone else is in school, what will happen in that case is the teacher will continue, or educator will continue to provide learning activities through our learning management system. So although they won't be delivering the curriculum face-to-face on Google Meet and facing those students online, that student will still have access to all the daily activities every day, the same ones that the students in class are working on. So it's not an ideal situation when we have that environment, but it's what we can afford to do with our resources. It would be nice to say that if we have a class that needs to, some are staying in school and some are isolating, that we're just going to hire another occasional teacher and we can split the class. But given the numbers and the shortage of occasional teachers, that's not a practical solution. So the solution we have in place is very similar to what took place last year, with the exception that that teacher doesn't have to necessarily be online. They can be in class with their students because they won't necessarily need to self-isolate. So that's our approach for this year, and we'll adjust it as needed.
I like the approach so far. Thank you very much.
Sarah, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to ask if, like for the kindergarten students, there are going to be any special strategies to help the grade 6s that are transitioning into new high schools to help them settle in, since they might have missed out on the school tours or teacher visits like there might have been before COVID?
Yes, thank you for your question and a good observation. In the one slide that looked at the students with special needs, we included some of the transition activities. So there will be students without special needs that also need that transition activity. So our grade 7 staff will work on that transition early that first week. As I mentioned, we're not going to jump right into curriculum. They are going to need time to build relationships and understand both the health protocols moving to a larger school and the advantages being in a high school environment. Right now, we do have students that have been identified as benefiting from those strategies, and we have staff over the summer that have been hired. Some of those grade 6 students are actually going into our schools this week prior to the official start in small numbers, so they can begin that transitioning. It's not something we can offer for every student right across the board, but those that we are aware, especially with whether it's mental health challenges, anxiety, stress, or students with special needs that just need a little extra assistance, we are providing that this week. And it will happen not just for the grade 6s, but we also have a transition from grade 8 to 9. So that will be another area. And it's a transition for our students coming from kindergarten into grade 1. So we do have some natural transition years like the grade 6 into 7 and the 8 into 9, and we'll spend special attention on those groups. So great question.
Thank you, Mr. Dimko.
First meeting, first question. Great. Trustee Curry.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the director. This is about, I think the slide said something about high school clinics, that we're going to provide high school vaccination clinics for students, I guess. Could you, is that an OPH initiative, or is that, and recommendation? And then also with regard to the testing for teachers that are not vaccinated, how are we going to ensure their privacy in that?
So I'm going to start with the second question about the privacy of our staff. It's not just teachers. It would be any staff member that, for either medical reasons or for personal choice right now, based on what the ministry's policy is looking like it will come out as. We're waiting for the final logistics from the ministry, so we haven't received that information yet. We do know they will be shipping rapid tests to us, so we'll be receiving several thousand tests this week. We will store those tests, and we have to look at what the direction is from the ministry on how to distribute those so that staff can receive them and do their testing at home in the privacy of their own home. But we do want to try and protect everyone's privacy. There will be certain staff members in our board, whether it's human resources or others, that will need to know the results. So some will have to have that information so we can determine whether or not it's safe for them to return to school. So I don't have all of those details yet. We're waiting for the logistics. We do know the tests are coming. They will be stored at the board to start. and we will look at the safest and most private way of distributing it to those that have indicated that they're not double vaccinated. And we'll implement that as we move along. Starting September 7th, we'll find out. By September 7th, we'll know how many staff fall into that category. That includes all employees that work for the board. So trustees would be included in that group as well, that will be looking for attestation, but we won't be disclosing to anyone's personal results. I'm going to call upon Associate Director Donaghy. She meets with Ottawa Public Health on a regular basis and can give you up-to-date information on the testing clinics for students.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I believe the trustee's question, the first part that I missed to answer, is about vaccination clinics. And so I assume that the question is around COVID-19 vaccines. As our director mentioned, I am in weekly, sometimes daily contact with Ottawa Public Health, and we started those meetings a number of weeks ago. So at the moment, there are many community clinics, and obviously we advertise and send that information for Ottawa Public Health to our families. And when school starts, we will do that as well, where COVID-19 vaccinations are available for students and adults. At this point, I don't have anything firm approved with myself and Ottawa Public Health in terms of COVID-19 vaccination clinics in our schools, but we certainly are cooperating with them and in the process of working out details for after school weekends, those types of things. So as soon as those details are finalized, I'd be happy to share them. There are a few plans in the works at the moment, but we don't have anything confirmed as of today.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Trustee Curry?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the director. With regard to the virtual academies, elementary and secondary, is it going to be a policy that there'll be no shifting back and forth between the virtual and the in-person? That if you're in the virtual in September, that you have to stay there all year long? And I ask this in the context of, you mentioned we have compassionate staff, that if are there going to be any exceptions made? And I'm thinking of, say, a grade 12 student who might go in virtual academy at the beginning because of the home situation or some concerns, and then for second semester might want to shift to in-person so she could or he could enjoy the in-person environment of their final year. So I was wondering if there are going to be any exceptions or if that's a hard and fast rule for everyone.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Trustee Curry, for the question. I'm going to start by just explaining a little bit about the process that we used last year and why we're not able to replicate that this year. So last year, as we were all learning about COVID and learning about the virtual, we had parents that were just not quite comfortable, understandably, whether or not they felt it would be safe to have their child in their school. So they wanted them in virtual for a temporary time period. For some, that was a matter of weeks. For some, it was a matter of months. And then they wanted to switch them back to their home school that they were still associated with. We were able to accommodate many of those requests because we took all of our central staff and we had them teaching in the virtual academy. So we had a large number of staff that weren't doing their normal jobs last year. We had placed them in virtual to get the virtual running. As trustees, you approved a drawdown of close to 2% of our reserve. So we had almost $11 million that we also funded for extra staffing to run the virtual program. And the ministry provided us with several $1 million that allowed us to run those two side by side. Where it didn't work was when a large number of students wanted to return to in-person. So if I had a class, I'll use an example of grade 1. Our class sizes in grade 1 are mandated to be 20 or less. 10% of them can be up to 23. So if I'm a class of 23 right now in grade 1, so I'm part of those 10%, and at that school, 3 students wanted to return to grade 1 in person. We're no longer compliant, which means we have to add another teacher to that school to be able to split that class. Not all that difficult on a one-by-one basis, as I just stated, but when you're dealing with thousands and thousands of classrooms and 83 schools, it's just not possible. So the model we put in place this year was a virtual school that was not meant to be a holding spot for students waiting to go back and forth. It was meant to be for those students that learn best in a virtual environment, regardless of COVID. And that's why the numbers are at about 5%, because for the far majority of students, 95%, They learn best in person. And for that 5%, for a variety of reasons, that excelled learning in a truly virtual environment, we provided that opportunity for them this year. So what will happen in terms of the question the trustee posed? Any student, whether they're in a traditional in-person school or they're in a virtual school, can apply through our existing policies for what's called a transfer between schools, more commonly known as a cross-boundary transfer. They would go to their principal and indicate, for this reason, I want to switch to a different school. Whether that school's in person or that school's virtual, the principal can say, yes, your reason makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to approve it if there's space in the other school. So the example I gave, someone can have a very good reason to switch from virtual back to in-person. And if the school they want only has one grade 2 class and they're already at the maximum, the answer is going to be no, we can't put you in that class at that school because there is no space. We can't incur the additional cost of staffing. But there is another school nearby that has space and we can put you into that school. And same for virtual. If someone is in face-to-face right now and all of a sudden there are health reasons that it no longer works, they can apply to virtual, and we have a little more flexibility in virtual because it's across the entire system. And we will find one of the classrooms that do have space and we'll do our best to move them. So there's a possibility the answer will be no, there's no space. But in most cases, if there's a good valid reason and the intent is a permanent change, we will facilitate that. So I hope that explanation is clear enough for everyone of what we're trying to do this year to show that we're not black and white policy or one or the other. It is gray. We'll operate in the gray and we'll try and support families, but we're just not able to allow people to constantly move back and forth between the two programs because of the changing environment of COVID in the city of Ottawa.
Okay, thank you very much.
Trustee Witt?
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on Trustee Curry's question to the director, curious if the ministry has changed the reporting date of the end of September to accommodate some of this movement, which is undoubtedly going to happen, or if they're intending to stay pretty firm on that from a staffing allocation point of view.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. The two reporting dates right now are remaining at the end of October and the end of March. So those two reporting dates are there. We anticipate that it's the headcount that will be important. So we will receive the same funding, whether a student is selected to go into virtual or they're in person. So that is helpful for us. So as long as a student is in one of those programs, they should count towards our numbers, and which is important for our funding. The area right now for trustees to be aware of that we have to watch when we start our school is our kindergarten age students. That's the age that we had the greatest fluctuations last year, and we anticipate the same this year. That if a 3 or 4 year old and a parent's not comfortable sending them to school, they may choose, even though they've registered for their school, not to send them because kindergarten is not mandated. Only school is not mandated till grade 1. What we're trying to do for those families is to say, we want you in our classrooms and we want to reserve a space for you and we'll work out what you're comfortable with. So as long as you're coming, whether it's 1 day a week or half days, until you do have that comfort level, we'll continue to support your particular situation. So personalized learning and flexibility is what we'll be about this year when it comes to registrations, making sure that anyone that registers has to be doing schoolwork and they have to be part of a classroom. Otherwise, we can't keep them on our registers.
Is there any other questions or comments? Trustee Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick one to the director. Are the class sizes this year going to be the same as they say were pre-COVID, or same as last year, or have they are they changed at all? And also, I think you made a comment, sometime anyways, about the virtual academy schools are not funded at the same rate by the province. Is that true?
I'll start through you, Mr. Chair. I'll start regarding class sizes. So the ministry has funded us based on traditional class sizes. So in Ontario, and for our board, what that means is kindergarten is funded on an average of 26 students across the board and to a maximum cap of 29. There are some exceptions where you could have space reasons or program reasons that you could be hitting 30, but the far majority will be on average of 26. In terms of primary grades 1, 2, and 3, we're funded based on 20 students per class, and 10% of those classes can be 23. Grades 4 to 8, we're funded based on 24.5 as an average. So you will have some classes that might be 15, and you'll have other classes that could be 29, could be 30. So we'll try and minimize those wherever we can, but that's the class sizes. And at high school, grades 9 to 12, we're funded at 23-1. Last year, if you look at our class size ratios, they were much smaller in person because we took that funding, but then we also injected the 11 million from reserves, all the extra staff from central, and the extra money from the government, and that allowed us to decrease class sizes across the board. We have some funds for that purpose this year. So once our school year starts, if we find, for example, that we have a grade 5 class that's sitting with 34, 35 students, it may be on paper today that it's 34, 35, but we have to wait till those students actually show up, because there is a chance that they've moved out of the city, they've moved to different locations, and they're not going to that school. So we have to wait till we physically see every student in every classroom to know what the true class size is. We then will look at how much money we have available to spend to decrease class sizes across the board. So we start with our largest classes. If we have a class of 34, 35, and we have extra funds, we will put those funds to decreasing those class sizes. We also have competing demands because we'll also find in September that we have some new students that require educational assistance. And we don't assign an EA to a particular student, but we assign them to the school to support multiple students. And often we find a need because of new enrollment to also invest in additional educational assistance. In our kindergarten classes, if they're above 15, we also have to add an ECE, so an early childhood educator for any class that's 16 or larger. So those are all expenses that our staffing team, along with our finance team, have to try and balance all those competing demands. So the answer to the trustee's question is we anticipate them to be similar to pre-COVID years. We have some funding to address it, but certainly not the level we had last year. And my comment regarding the virtual schools, I'll use the example of a high school. So the ministry right now, we may be funded with some additional staff when it comes to high school on top of that class size. So for example, we would have funding to provide resource teachers, funding to provide guidance. We have the vice principals and principal assignments. We're not receiving that level of funding for the virtual school. So anything that's outside of the classroom, we're not receiving the funding to assist. So we've had to spend close to $2 million, that's my estimate, to be able to run our virtual schools in the manner that we're offering them next year. That money is coming from our operating budget, which you approved. So we've prioritized being able to offer those options to those 5% of students. The classes themselves are funded appropriately. So they're funded on the same averages, whether someone's in person or virtual. It's all the additional staff that we need to put in place to run a school system, including your caretakers, your office administrators, all of those different positions that are important parts of our school teams. Those are not necessarily funded for the virtual schools. Now, we may not have a caretaker need in the virtual school, but we have all the other needs for sure. And there's a lot of extra technical needs that come with that.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for those explanations.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments? I understand, Trustee Moore, you have a motion you'd like to bring forward?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm moving the motion and Trustee Simpson is seconding the motion. The Board of Trustees directs the Director of Education and/or the Chairperson of the Board to write a letter asking the Minister of Education to create a province-wide mandate for vaccination of all education workers.
Thank you. Discussion? Questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Trustee, what you want to bring a motion forward, or Trustee Coburn?
I'm happy to read the motion, and Trustee Coburn can certainly speak to the motion first as he's moving it, and I'm seconding it. So this is a motion moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by myself, that given the current lack of a formal provincial policy from the Ministry of Education around mandatory vaccinations for staff, and in light of the school year beginning on Tuesday, September 7th, 2021, the OCSB Board of Trustees direct our senior administration to develop a mandatory vaccination policy for all board staff for consideration by trustees and bring an update to the next board meeting on September the 14th.
Thank you. Trustee Coburn, you're moving that, and Trustee Whitted, you're seconding it.
Yes?
Yes.
Discussion? Questions or comments? Trustee Whitted?
I'll happily let Trustee Coburn go first as he's moving the motion, but I do have a few comments about it as well.
Okay, yeah, I'll make a few comments. Again, we've heard that we haven't been given specific direction by the ministry with regards to this. And I feel it's important that we as a school board show leadership. I know other educational institutions in this city have done that. And so I think it's important that we show leadership on this issue. And so that's why I'm bringing forward the motion along with Trustee Whitted.
Thank you. Trustee Whitted?
Thank you, Chair. Just to build on that, we know that tonight our colleagues at the Ottawa Carleton District School Board are considering a very similar motion. And we know that workplaces across the city of Ottawa and frankly across Canada are considering what mandatory vaccinations look like and would feel like with their staff in their various different settings. I personally believe that our staff who interact with students, the public, and their colleagues each day should be vaccinated unless they medically can't. And I support the fact that we're showing and taking the step to show that we are being a leader in Ontario, that we're thinking ahead and developing a policy that frankly responds to what a number of the parents are saying and what we're hearing in our community and what our union partners, in fact, are even telling us that they want the confidence that our school environment is a safe place to work and to learn. So I'm happy to bring this forward with Trustee Coburn and would certainly appreciate the support of colleagues around the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Simpson?
I also would like to speak in favor of this motion. I think Alex Munter, the CEO of GEO, said it best, that a large percentage of the children that they serve, and that this would be the same for us with the number of elementary schools we have, cannot be vaccinated. So it's incumbent upon us to safeguard against these children being exposed to COVID. I also think it's extremely important that we do know what the impact of the amount of time that children have to stay at home for quarantine, and we'd like to be able to minimize this year and have as much face-to-face learning and keeping our children in school as much as possible. And I think that this motion would help ameliorate the situation of children needing to be learning virtually.
Thank you. Anyone else? Trustee Curry?
I fully support this motion. I think in the current situation of the vacuum created by the lack of provincial action on this, that it's what we should do and to help make our school environments as safe as possible, not only for the students, especially the elementary students who can't be vaccinated, but also for the staff themselves to make it as safe as possible for them. So I fully support it. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee McEwen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also support this motion and totally agree with what has all been said. Other institutions in this city and across this country have implemented mandatory vaccinations. So I think we need to be doing this for the safety of our children for sure and our staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Lawrence, then Trustee Moore.
New times require new responses, and I want to ditto what Trustee Curry said. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully support this motion. I fully believe that we take care of our children first, and what Trustee Simpson said, I fully agree with. Thank you.
Thank you. I just looking to see if there's anybody that hasn't spoken. Back to Trustee Whitted.
Just one final comment, Chair, if I may, and that's just around the fact that I know this doesn't address the fact that we won't have a policy on day one when schools open next Tuesday. And I think many schools will be in that same boat. But we are showing leadership, and hopefully soon after, with a report coming back to the board on the 14th, or at least an update from senior admin and consideration, I would hope shortly thereafter. We'll work as quickly as possible to have something in place, ASAP. I would hope, and I'd certainly call on the ministry to beat us to the punch, if you will, and come forward with a formal policy and negate the need for us to actually have to pass this as board policy. But in the interim, I'm very pleased to see our colleagues are supporting that.
Thank you. Trustee McEwen?
Just one comment that when you're sending the letter, Mr. Chair, that you may include in it that we have made this motion. And so we're moving forward, and we'd appreciate their leadership and support on it.
I'll do that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Mr. Chair, could I just ask for a recorded vote, please?
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I will call each of the trustees by name for the recorded vote. I'll be going in order of what I'm seeing on the screen and then finishing with the chair. So I'll begin with Vice Chair Whittet.
Yes.
Trustee Coburn.
Yes.
Trustee Lawrence.
Yes.
Trustee Simpson.
Yes.
Trustee McEwen.
Yes.
Trustee Curry.
Yes.
Trustee Moore.
Yes.
And Trustee Mullen.
Yes.
For your information, Trustee Mullen, we have, or Chair Mullen, we have 8 trustees present during today's meeting, and the vote is unanimous, 8-0.
I will include that in the letter. Thank you. Any other further or final comments, Director D'Amico?
No, we will take what you've read today and we'll begin work on that. And I guess my other comment is just to reiterate that for September 7th, although there is no formal policy that's yet been released by the province, we do have those operating guidelines for vaccinations, which we have posted on our website, and we will be enacting those operation guidelines. So parents can be assured that we will have, by September 7th, found out any staff that are not double vaccinated. And if they, whether it's medical reason or personal reason, until the change of any formal policy comes out, they will be required to do testing. So we do feel that even in the absence of a formal provincial policy or a board policy, that our schools will remain safe. And the far majority of educators make up our community, and the community right now has a high percentage of vaccination. So we anticipate those will be our results, but we will be transparent and show that data on our board website. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a mover, please, for the director's report? Trustee Lawrence, Trustee Curry. I shouldn't call it the director's report. It's the update on the return to school for September 2021. That the memorandum from the Director of Education dated August 26, 2021, entitled Update or Return to School September 2021 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There's no new business. There's no notice of motions. Confirmation of the action report of June 22nd, 2021. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Moore and Trustee Simpson. That the action report for the period of June 22nd, 2021 be received. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There's no inquiries. Is there any administrative announcements? Seeing none. Have a motion to adjourn, please. Can I have someone move it? Trustee McEwen, Trustee Coburn. That the regular board meeting of August 31st, 2021 be adjourned at 8:42 p.m. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Please